Good morning, Michael. How are you?
Good. Well, you pulled me in first this time.
I know. Well, I'm trying to be respectful.
Respect. I was just thinking maybe it was Ace before Beauty this time.
What before Beauty?
Ace before Beauty.
Oh, Ace. Oh, come on. Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that, I'm not even talking to you anymore. But in all seriousness, I mean, we just decided Matt Failing is with us today. He has got such a great presentation for you that we were afraid if we let me keep talking that we wouldn't get through Matt's presentation. So we're going to go ahead and dispense with the niceties and bring Mr. Failing in this morning. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing great. Jenny, how are you doing?
I think I'm doing okay. No, I am. I'm just
How's it feel to be an ace?
Yeah, I know. What is that? What even is that, Michael?
No, I'm the ace. I'm the ace.
I know.
You were the
Oh
okay.
no, he's the ace.
Oh, he's the
I don't
ace.
even. Yes, okay. He thinks he's the ace, whatever that is.
All right. Keeping it humble over there. I see.
Well, and that's a great way to sprint off into what we were going to talk about today.
It is. So
I contacted you because our mutual friend Sherry Conley said, because I wanted to do a show, Michael and I wanted to do a show about ethics. And she said, well, you need to call my friend Matt Failing and talk to him. Give us just a little bit of your background because I think it's really interesting. So give us a little bit of your background and then let's hear what you go into what you've got going on.
So I started with, I graduated from Noble High School back in, so I'm a local born bred Oklahoma guy. Although my family is from mostly from upstate New York, but my folks moved here back in the 70s and then decided to settle down and have me. So I've been here most of my life. And I went to, I was a big music guy for most of the first part of my life. And I played, as they lovingly say in the music world, I was a concussionist. Percussion, I love that, actually. Banging on drums all day, right? Yeah. Percussionist.
Joe Walsh had a song about that.
So I played everything from 4-mallet marimba to snare and bass and trap and timpani and everything, all the whole gamut of it. And went into music education where I taught in Oklahoma City public schools for a little while. And that was an exercise in futility. I saw very quickly how rough our public schools were, and decided I probably don't want to do this for the rest of my life, and looked at law school.
That's kind of a shame, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is because I love doing it. I love music. I love interacting with kids, and I think music is an important thing for kids to be involved in. It stimulates brain development in ways that nothing else can really. But that being said, it just, and it wasn't the kids I was frustrated with. It was, the lack of support. Yeah. But so I decided, hey, let's try law school. And it worked out pretty well.
Because I'm going to go from music teacher to law.
I know. Yeah. Just sometimes you just, you get a calling and you just go, okay, let's do this. Yeah. It worked well for me. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed law school. It was definitely a very different world. It was, I went from do re mi to Supreme Court hearings and
right.
Excuse me. But anyway, so I took and passed the bar exam back in 2012, and I established my own law firm. I worked with several attorneys in the city for a while to sort of get established and learn the ropes. And And here I am about a decade later, practicing law and now teaching at Rose. I teach civil procedure to in the fall to paralegal students, and then I teach business law to business associate students. And so I think it's important for both of those very different groups to have different legal perspectives. And that's where some of this ethics that we're talking about today comes from. Some of these slides come from those classes and what I share with those students. So part of being an attorney is having a code of ethics to live by. Attorneys are push ethics quite a lot, especially in our CLE, the continuing legal education courses that we are mandated to take every year. And some of that is we have to take ethics courses every year and keep up with, what is considered ethical practice of law, which is, a very big can of worms, really. But here I am now talking to you. I missed a rather important step where back in 2016, I decided to try to run for a House, Sherry seat before she did. And that's how I sort of got connected with Sherry. She's fantastic. I like Sherry. She's awesome. And she, I think she and I both have been influential on each other. She's changed my perspectives and I've changed hers because we talk to each other.
Wait, what? I'm sorry. What is that?
That's crazy. When I started this whole process, my background, both of my parents, my mom and dad, were both UAW members, and they worked for the General Motors plant.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Before it shut down.
Yes.
And my wife's dad also worked for the General Motor plant. So we have 3 General Motors workers in the family, UAW workers. And so, coming from that background, that strong middle class background, I thought, oh, we're Democrats, definitely. And then I started diving into the political world and found out that was not the case at all.
No, I've spoken to you. You're not a Democrat.
Yeah. And so I have several friends who are Democrats. I feel I have conversations with them, and we have vibrant disagreements, which I feel is healthy because we learn from each other. I learn from them.
Yeah, and I'm going to stop you right there because that is the reason why I asked you to come on today.
Sure.
And if you recall in our original conversation, my frustration has been that what you've experienced is not the norm at all, because we don't seem to be able to have disagreements and not have some kind of a throwdown or not hate one another or go out and say crappy things about each other on Twitter or what. I mean, it's gotten to the point where in my personal opinion, it's gotten to the point where we don't talk to each other. We talk at each other mainly, and then we also talk past each other. Mm-hmm. And it's my belief really that part of this is tied up in a misunderstanding of ethics and how people don't understand that honesty solves a lot of these problems, and that even when we don't agree, so long as we have some understanding of ethics, that we can honestly communicate. And I'm not going to go off on Twitter and go, nah, failing is a blah, 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 and is blah, 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 right?
Well, if you do, it's fine by me, but
but I don't want us to. I want us to be able to talk. And
well, some of that, the reason I say that is some of that is we have to some extent let that go a little bit when people do that and see it for what it is, and unfortunate venting of frustration, and social media, like you said, Twitter, these sort of spaces tend to be echo chambers, and that's a lot of the problem, right? we tend to talk to people who only agree with what we agree with, and that's problematic, because what that does is it gives us a diluted sense of what the world really looks like out there. Because when you're walking down the street, you're not going to just find people who agree with you.
Who are your
We have
Facebook
to,
friends?
or your Facebook friends, exactly. We have to live in this world together and figure out a mutually beneficial path forward for all of us. And our founding fathers figured that out 200 and some odd years ago, how to do that. And it's called liberty, right? And so what that means, the great idea of America is that we are this huge melting pot or mixing pot, right, of ideas, and we can put it all together, and we can coexist and peacefully, and there's enough room in this world for all of us, is kind of the idea, right? And so, but it seems lately that there's this pervasive mentality of trying to champion your ideas onto others, rather than just living them, right? And so I think if we all just live our ideas and be them and become them, rather than trying to force others to be them, we get to this point where we can all kind of just relax and be ourselves and accept each other for who we are,
Well, why don't you start your
easier said than done,
presentation?
right?
Because I am dying
Sure,
to
okay.
hear all of this, because it's really a fascinating. I looked through your slides and they're fascinating.
Okay, sure. Well, we can dive into it here. So let me try to do a share screen without the echo of
And if it
the
doesn't
echo
work, I'll just pull the slides up.
of doom here.
Echo of doom.
The echo of doom. Here we go. Let me try.
It is kind of, actually, it's a little disconcerting. It's like Alice in Wonderland.
It
All right, do I
is.
need to pull them in? I think I do.
Are you guys seeing my slide
Yes.
now?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
fantastic. Okay.
Okay.
So this is kind of what I use in some of my classes, a little bit for a presentation. So what do ethics have to do with anything, or how to be a good human in a corrupt world, right? It's hard, right? But it is possible. So one of the first things I talk about with my business students is business ethics. And we sort of start with a definition of what ethics is. It's simply a branch of philosophy dealing with values that relate to the nature of human conduct. Okay, so law and ethics are almost intrinsically the same thing, except that law is more of a consequence for not following expected ethics, whereas ethics themselves are more of the hypothetical type level of problem solving. And ethics and morals are different, and I want to make sure that people understand that difference, because a lot of times these two terms get thrown around interchangeably and they're not the same thing. And so I want to make sure that everyone understands that ethics are specifically values created by society or a group of people, that in that group of people says this is the standard of what is expected out of behavior within the group. Okay, that's ethics. Morals, on the other hand, are so they're societal decisions. Morals, on the other hand, are more self-determinative. Okay, from family, education, religion, or personal beliefs. Okay, if I believe it is wrong to eat meat on a Friday, okay, that's more of a moral. It's more of a moral conviction than an ethical one. Okay. Now, if we all get together and say we all agree that we should not eat meat on a Friday, then it becomes an ethical value. It goes from a moral value to an ethical one. Okay. So I just want to make that distinction there, because a lot of people misunderstand that. So in the business
Well, so let
world,
me ask you. Can I ask you a quick question?
sure.
So you mentioned our founding fathers at first, and one quote that I love from John Adams was basically that the Constitution was made for a wholly moral people. It's
Yeah.
completely inadequate to the governance of any other. And
Yes.
so I my thought process has always been the Constitution doesn't work unless we can control ourselves. I mean,
Right.
personally. So we have our own set of morals. We're not relying on societal ethics. We're
Right.
relying on our own morals to go, well, I'm not going to steal from that person while he's not looking or stick my hand in the till at my business. So,
Right.
I mean, do you kind of, is that
I
kind of
definitely
right? Or you,
No, I definitely agree with that. And a democracy requires not just an ethical people, but also an intelligent ethical people. You know, because governance, which is essentially what democratic republic is, right? Which is what we have. Requires the people who run the government, us, to be engaged, to be intelligent, and to be ethical, right? In order for it to work. If we aren't those things, it doesn't work. And so, you can't have a society where society is built on trust above all other things, right? We can't have a business relationship or business dealings. We can't have personal relationships or personal dealings without trust, right? And so ethics, at fundamentally the reason for ethics and the bottom line is we have to be able to trust each other to have a society.
no.
And I think that's kind of maybe what our founding father Adams is saying there is the foundation of the Constitution is built on the fact that we all are a tight-knit community that trusts each other. And that has, over time, as we've grown, and America is in many ways a victim of its own success,
Yeah.
right? And so, as we've grown and as we've evolved as a people and technological advancements and working out how to deal with those and how to use them ethically. And one of the newest ethical debates, of course, is going to be artificial intelligence and how to use that ethically, right? And that's a whole other topic, maybe for another time. But ethics is a pervasive theme throughout all of human history that comes in at every level, from personal morals to expected societal conduct, and how to use everything from technology to money to law, all of it, right? So specifically here, talking about business ethics, is sort of the balancing of the goal of profit with the values of individuals and society. And so in business, we have this, the point of business is to make money, right? Does a business have a responsibility to make its shareholders ridiculously rich, or does it also have some sort of social responsibility to society, to prevent society from breaking, or at the very least to make sure that its products are safe and are not doing harm at the expense of making money.
We're not
So
making baby cribs and churning them out that are going to fall down on kids. And
exactly, right. And so we have this sort of the fundamental ethical issues in business is balancing the goal of making profits with the responsibility of protecting society at large from harm, from whatever is being sold out there, right? And so we have this idea of positive law, which is law enacted and codified by governmental authority. And an example of this is sort of the as is or buyer beware doctrine, which, if you purchase a car, positive law says that it's as long as you use the phrase as is somewhere in the contract, if the car falls apart the next day, then it's the buyer's problem. even though this inherently doesn't feel right or fair to people. If you go out and you buy a car, you have at least some sort of expectation that it's going to work for a little while before it falls apart. However, the idea behind this is that the duty is on the buyer to inspect the vehicle before the purchase and not on the seller to make it right. And this doesn't sit well with a lot of people, but in the law, we don't deal with conscience so much as we deal in contracts and performance of duties and who has the duty. And here it's on the buyer. The buyer should have inspected the vehicle, failed to do so, and therefore it's the buyer that's left holding the short end of the stick.
Well, and I want to actually even say something at this point too, because
Sure.
what you're talking about to me was the beginning of what we're seeing right now, which is I'm too lazy to do anything for myself. So I need to have law or government do it for me.
Step in. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's kind of what, the law has to constantly balance multiple different rights, right? That's why it's the scales of justice, right? That's what represents the law. And it's a great representation because there's always this balancing between a buyer and a seller, and somebody that makes a product, somebody that uses the product, right? And so ethically, ethics in the business world or just in general are kind of the same thing. They're a weighing of individual rights and duties and responsibilities. And so in this instance, the law steps in with lemon laws. That's the big solution in a situation like this. Now lemon laws apply to new vehicles only, but
right.
And we have this 4 attempt rule where it says, you buy a brand new vehicle, you expect it to work. There's an expectation that, when you spend that kind of money, you're going to get a value for that money. That's the ethics behind that, right? And so then, but there has to also be an opportunity to fix the problem. So we have this 4 attempt rule. They have 4 chances to try to correct the defect. If on the 4th chance it still does not get corrected, then they must replace the vehicle completely and outright. Okay.
Well, and it's so funny that you bring that one up because I actually had a Volkswagen Rabbit, and this was, in the early 80s, and when they first came out, and I got one. And that sucker was a nightmare. I mean, it would just stop. It was a horrible thing. But that was before we had lemon laws.
Right.
Excuse me. And I'll tell you, trying to get that dealership to do anything about that car was almost impossible. And it's sad to me that you have to create a law because I can't just go, look, the thing's broken down 3 times now. It's not even a year old. I have to keep repairing it or bringing it back. Something's the matter. And then the people go, oh my gosh, Jenny, I'm so sorry about that. That is a problem. Let's see what we can do. But then they won't do that. So you have to create a law.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, and I'll talk to that. I talked about laissez-faire markets.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of people like to champion the idea of laissez-faire, which is, just leave the market alone, it'll regulate itself. But in practicality, what happens to people is your experience there, is we have people that enter the market and just, with basically their entire goal is to make profits at any cost, right? And not stand behind their product or not, and so that's where the entire body of law that deals with warranties and contractual provisions and warranties and things of that nature, breaches of contract. That whole body of law is based off of basically this problem in business ethics of profits versus quality of product. And I don't know if you guys have noticed lately or not, but we have this concept now of planned obsolescence in a lot of the products that people make.
Can anybody say iPhone?
Yeah, absolutely. Or even your refrigerator, your washing machine, your microwave, your stove, all of it these days, your vehicle, your house, right? The way that we build things is constantly getting cheaper, which means things break quicker. We're using plastic parts instead of metal parts. We're using, the thinnest material possible to continue, to produce a product that works, but only for a limited amount of time. Because, if I'm a company and I make washing machines, I want you buying a new washing machine every 3 to 5 years. I don't want you buying one every 50 years. That doesn't help my bottom line, right? And so we have this ethical dilemma of what responsibility do we have to make a product that is reasonable and reliable for the consumer, while still balancing the goal of creating profits for the business. And so, we could certainly dive into that more, but but I feel, one of the main things about to answer the question of whether something is ethical is to first ask whether it's legal, because the law usually, but not always, of course, usually falls on the side of doing what is right, or at least makes a good faith attempt at doing so. Okay? If something's illegal, it's most likely because it's considered unethical. It's why we have a law in the first place. Somebody complained, this isn't fair. And so that's why we have a law, like you said, with the car example you gave. That's perfect. 2008, you guys probably remember this. The subprime mortgage financial collapse was due to an ethical dilemma, because there was a lack of regulation in the market. And when there's a lack of regulation, and I'm not championing regulation, because there is also a balancing here. Too much regulation prevents the market from being able to function as well. So again, it's a balance, right? But a lack of regulation also creates a higher chance of unethical conduct in order to gain a competitive edge. So banks were selling worthless loans, causing high foreclosure rates. The SEC and the Federal Reserve had to step in and say, guys, you're gonna tank our economy. You can't do this. The Federal Reserve, which is now known as the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, exists to help regulate ethics in business relationships. Better Business Bureau, which is not a government entity, but a private entity, but they help monitor ethical business conduct. And I will say also, online reviews have done have been very influential in sort of ethical business conduct. What's the first thing people do when they're buying online? They look at the reviews, right? And so their internet and reviews have been very influential with helping people regulate, what companies are trustworthy and which ones aren't. And then, ethical traps that you look at in business: self-dealing, nepotism, double dipping, price gouging, insider trading, tax evasion, fraud, breach of contract, breach of warranty, pyramid schemes. You guys remember Bernie Madoff and that whole situation, right? So,
well, there were several of them there that actually described unethical governmental practices as well, which I'm hoping we're going to be able to get to, since that's my.
Yes, exactly. So I'm gonna skip through some of this for time purposes, because this is talking about antitrust laws and things like that. And you said you were going to try to make this slide available for
Yes,
anyone.
I am. No, I'm going to make the whole presentation. I'll download it on PDF and put it up and just put it on the website with a link to the video. And I'll also put it underneath. I'll also put it underneath the videos on Rumble and YouTube in there in the description.
Great. Awesome. Great. So, so this is, so anyone that's interested in antitrust laws can look into these: the Sherman Act, the Clayton Act, Robinson-Patman Act. These are, again, just laws that help, help deal with some of these ethical issues in business regulation.
But that basically were put into place because people can't play nice with other people.
Well, right, exactly, and again, it always goes back to balancing, doing what's ethical. This one in particular, Amazon, and I'm not picking on Amazon here, but Amazon for a while was selling books and ebooks while also owning the publishing companies and recruiting authors while holding shipments of non-Amazon author books in order to affect the sales and encourage more authors to sign with Amazon Publishing. And so Amazon was basically holding the entire market hostage and saying, if you want to get a book out there, you go through us, you publish with us or else. And so it was a Clayton Act violation, and they had to stop doing it. But the point here is companies will do unethical things to in the interest of money, because it's human nature to do so. And
because
so
the love of money is the
love
root of all evil.
There we go.
Exactly. Yep, that's exactly right.
It's not money, and people get that mixed up. It's not money is the root of all evil. That's not what was said. It is the love of money. You can have money. You can have gazillions of dollars, but you can't love it so much that that's all you want, and you deal unethically and poorly with your neighbor and the poor. Exactly. I'll just channel Jesus there.
And become you're absolutely right. And you can't money itself cannot be the goal of life, because money is a means to an end, not an end. And I think a lot of folks don't realize that. But a lot of people have this sort of idea of, if only I had more money, I would be happy. But I see a lot of people with plenty of money that are miserable. And so, there's this sense of money equates to happiness. And I don't think that that's necessarily true. In fact, I would argue that being an ethical person and living an ethical life is what will lead you to happiness a lot quicker than money, So.
Well, I think, unfortunately, that's kind of a lot of the philosophy of the Western world, right? I mean, that was the great thing about America originally, was that we had, this great open economic system, and we were kind of, liberal and letting people do what they wanted. But then the problem was, people couldn't behave. So, I do kind of a little bit blame the kind of Western ideal of, I want to keep up with the Joneses for a lot of this, just kind of permeating our culture. And I will say too, the lack of teaching ethics, and the fact that we don't like Christianity anymore, and don't want to listen to what Jesus said. So that's, I think, a whole big blob of reasons.
And you're talking and you're talking about a topic that we'll get to in a second, which is the problem between moral relativism and absolute morality, and I want to talk about that. So let me to skip ahead. Let me just look at some of these examples here, and we can be done with this at end of things topic. So modern examples of ethical problems. Social media's business model of selling people's personal information to other businesses for profit. Okay, you could look at this and say, how dare you sell my personal information to another business and get rich off of it, right? Who do you think you are? Well, unfortunately, when you click that button and sign up for Facebook or Twitter or whatever, you're agreeing to give them the license of your personal information over to them. And one of the problems here is that we don't have any ability to really negotiate these contracts. I mean, when you go buy a car, you can at least negotiate the price a little bit, and you can negotiate what kind of vehicle you want, what color you want it in, right? Things like that. When you sign up for social media or any of these online products, you have to click what? An end user license agreement, right? An EULA. And you have zero ability to negotiate with it. You either agree and you use our product, or you don't agree and you can't use our product. So is that excuse me, so is that ethical? To basically just tell people, we're not going to negotiate contract terms with you. You either agree to give us your personal information, or you can no longer use our product. So that's a whole bag of worms there. Google search engines, excluding competitors who don't pay premium pricing to them. You know, I mean, this is behavior that the mafia used to do, right? Blocking out competitors and using your money and power and authority to do that kind of thing. Nike using third world country labor to make products at low cost and then bringing them back to America and selling them at really high prices. An ethically questionable practice for sure. Hiring family members, nepotism over, third-party independent contractors, especially while using government funds. And Oklahoma, I'm sorry, and even conservatives in Oklahoma, I'm sorry to say, have a big problem with this one sometimes.
Yes.
It's like, oh, well, we're going to rebuild this road. Okay, well, it's supposed to be.
But my cousin Joe that has a asphalt company.
Yep. That's exactly right. Yep. My cousin Joe has his asphalt company, and we're going to just, we're going to use his company, even though it's a blind bid. Well, I'll just tell Joe what he needs to bid to win the bid. And then, that kind of nonsense goes on just absolutely way too much, way too much. Which of course breeds the question, how do you stop it from happening? And I think, we the people being more involved in and asking questions about things like, why is this company being chosen to do this construction job? And are they really the best company to be doing the job, or are there some ties here that need some explanation? Maybe they really are the best company that came in at the lowest price. That can entirely be possible. Sometimes nepotism isn't the goal, but an inadvertent side effect. However, that's pretty rare. Usually, if there should be some sort of disclosures at the very least of if somebody in government is hiring the company and they know the owner of the company, they're friends with them, or they're related to them somehow, they need to there needs to be some sort of mandatory disclosure about that. And then there needs to be maybe a hearing or a meeting that talks about whether or not it's still in the best interest to continue moving forward, despite the fact that there's this apparent conflict of interest, right? So, and we've got business models that require buy-ins, recruitments, things like MLM, multi-level marketing, Ponzi schemes. And these are different things. Multi-level marketing is illegal. Ponzi schemes are illegal, but they are very close to each other in structure. So, I don't want to get into that too heavily, but you want to be careful dealing with some of those MLM companies and make sure that they're not in fact Ponzi schemes that are marketing themselves as MLM, because there's a few of those out there. Amazon, we talked about buying out market competition before it gets large enough to have a competitive edge. Pharmacy companies charging different prices for prescriptions based on insurance or out-of-pocket costs. We have this issue. Walmart came out with their $12 prescription plan or whatever it was, and CVS, Walgreens, some of these other companies, in order to compete with that, if you came in and said, I've got an out-of-pocket cash pay for a prescription, they would sell it to you the same price as Walmart. But if you had insurance, they would turn around and sell it to you at insurance cost for $120. Where if it was cash pay, it would be $12. Well, what does that do to your insurance premiums? So those types of practices, charging different prices to different people, turning away customers with little capital, or implementing policies that only attract high-end clients, right? All of these things. But okay, so I do briefly want to just share a couple websites as well that are great resources for folks to help with some of these ethical issues. The main website for the U.S. government is usa.gov. It's a great resource, a great website. But there's one thing I do want to point out about this website that I'm not fond of, because this is the front page of our government, right? Let me see if it'll let me pull this up. And do you notice, what's the first thing that you notice on this website?
A lot of people that are not American.
Exactly right. Yeah. So, USA.gov, our main website, is clearly geared towards, you know, uh, d- diversity and inclusion, right? Is the first thing that kind of comes to mind when you see a picture like this. Oh, and possibly illegal immigrants. So it's geared towards, hey, come to America, right? And then
To get your government services, because we'll
get
give you
your
whatever
what?
you want.
To get what?
Benefits.
Your benefits, right? And then over here, way over at the end, we talk about scams and fraud, taxes and travel. So clearly, even the way that our website is structured, we see some of the inherent problems that's going on. Topics and services. Come get your services here. Let's tell you about the government. Come get your benefits, right? The U.S. government is not a service organization, right?
I'm sorry, say that again.
The U.S. government is not a service organization, right?
Well, Matt, doesn't it all go back to the government in the first place? They're the ones that are unethical. They're the ones where the regulators fail over and over again. We have all these laws, we have all these policies, we have all these regulations, yet the government is who allows these companies to use child labor to bring these products in. The government allows these bankers to create these bad products. There's no repercussion. And even like with my own experience with like parents in the local school system, there's obscure laws on the books that only allow a parent to even sue a school district for a certain amount of money. There's no real repercussion for parents, or just people in general. I think people always want to do the right thing. I mean, I always go back to saying, one of the things that's overlooked in our country that makes us, or that made us so great, yes, we have freedom. We're the light, we're shining light on the hill. But ultimately, we were the most ethical country probably ever. We
absolutely
and
not that long ago.
Yeah. I mean, and we would go and help, and we would fight in wars, and we would give the land back over. I mean, no one else did that through time.
No.
I mean, you conquer someplace, you control it, but not us.
You kept it, right? Yeah.
But I blame it all on, okay. So we know that the size of the government is huge, but the government, in my opinion, is the ground zero at fault across all these levels here.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I 100% agree with you. And that's kind of what we see here with these government websites. And so, the government's trying to do too much. It's trying to overstep its authority given to it in the Constitution. And it's trying to become, the world police instead of the government, right? And fundamentally, that's problematic, because we as taxpayers are funding that, and we never signed up to become the world police, right? When the Constitution was created, it wasn't created we the people, we the world police, right? It says we the people, right? And so the government was designed for us, the people, and it's been convoluted and twisted and turned into this. Basically a service organization for immigrants rather than right. I mean, that's kind of what it's become. Some other interesting websites here. Here's one that I like to point out, because a lot of people don't realize the U.S. government manual. How many people even know that
there's a manual?
How many people know the government has a manual? This is the official handbook of the federal government. And it was created in around the New Deal era publication. It was published as a loose leaf notebook originally. And the government manual is a regularly updated special edition of the Federal Register. Its contents include leadership tables and descriptions of agency activities and programs of the executive, judicial, and legislative branches, as well as activities and programs of quasi-official agencies and international organizations in which the United States participates as a member. And so this is sort of a hidden, like, people don't know about this, but it's very interesting. It's very eye-opening and interesting to see sort of the government because of open records requests, the government has to tell us what they're doing, but they don't like doing that. So they are really good at hiding the information that they have to tell us. But one of
Well,
my
I just think
jobs,
it's interesting because it says, I mean, so this was a Roosevelt deal. I mean,
Yep.
because think about it, how many programs in his, well, it was 12 years that he served, right? In
Mhm.
all of his 12 years, think about all the number of programs. He probably had to put a manual together because he increased the
Yep.
size of government so
Yeah.
much, nobody knew what they were doing.
Well, that's
That's
kind of
kind
where
of when the
everything.
right hand quit knowing what the left hand was doing.
That's
Thank you,
exactly right.
Roosevelt.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it started out as under the New Deal, and now it includes, we're talking about atmospheric carbon dioxide, ATV safety, bank regulation, bird watchers, Bitcoin, bullying, bus travel, carbon monoxide, business opportunities, all of these things. COVID, we're talking about, the Electoral College, endangered species and wildlife, flood insurance. I mean, it just the scope of things here. Lessons of the Holocaust. Why is our government spending,
Well, look
spending
at the
money on
next one,
and
LGBT
LGBT
youth.
youth? Right. Why is our government spending money on LGBT youth?
So the Electoral
programs?
College is the only thing that you read that has anything to do with the Constitution.
Right. Exactly. All of the rest of this stuff is way outside the scope of what government's supposed to even be having their hands in. Possibly veterans, right? But most of this stuff and law enforcement, maybe,
goodness.
but there's a lot of just unnecessary stuff that's going on here. And so that's one of the main reasons I wanted to share these websites with you guys, and so that people are aware of what's going on, that consumer finance, and this is another one, the Federal Register. I don't know if you guys are aware of or read the Federal Register regularly, but did you know that our government has basically a newspaper that it puts out every day? It's called the Federal Register. It's the daily journal of the United States government.
Yeah, there have been some great things published in there.
Right, there has been, right, and so it's not all bad by any means. But what I want to point out is that we as citizens can have our voice heard here in the Federal Register by making public comment on new rules and regulations, and saying, and having our voices heard. And a lot of people don't realize that they can do that they have that ability. And so I want to just want to briefly point out, one of the big topics going on right now is regulations to implement the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. And there's this push to, give pregnant workers more protections. And so, a lot of people aren't even aware this is happening right now in our government. And so this kind of helps. And so this kind of helps let people know what is happening in government without a spin, right? If you go to CNN every day and you're letting them tell you what's happening in your government, or even Fox or MSNBC, any of those sources, if you're going to those sources instead of this one, you're not getting, you're getting what they want you to know. This is telling you what is really happening, right, in your government on a daily basis. These are presidential documents, proclamations, and that's true. GovInfo also is another good site for that. The Congressional Record Daily Digest, the budget. If you want to look at the money that the government is using, you can look at the budget right here. It's all public record. A lot of people don't realize how easy it is to find this information. It's just right here in a PDF if you want to look at it, right? So, but a lot of people argue about what's in the budget, and they don't know what it is, what's in it and what it means, and all of that. And so,
I figure when they start using actual money and not made up pieces of paper, then I'll actually put some effort into figuring it out.
Right? Yeah. Well, that's a lot of the problem too.
Right, Michael?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so one thing I just want to mention real quick about administrative agencies, and this is part of what the problem I was talking about. The government's just trying to do too much. how many administrative agencies do you think you are without cheating and looking at that number that's already on the screen there?
I actually kind of knew because I had already looked it up. I mean,
Okay.
you know what you really need, because that's national, but you know, one
Yeah.
of the things that you really need to
There's
do is
state.
look up the number of boards and commissions in Oklahoma.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's another
We're
big
not
one.
quite up to that number, but we're
No,
getting close.
but getting pretty close. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, why do we have 432 different departments, agencies, and sub-agencies in the federal government? You know, I mean, that seems extremely excessive, right? Including everything from the Christopher Columbus Quincentenary Jubilee Commission to the Assassination Records Review Board and Oklahoma City National Memorial Trust. I understand that one, but you know, some of these don't make a whole lot of sense. And we have all of these things, you know, the USPS, the CDC, Secret Service, DHS, FBI, CIA, NASA, and the DOD, right? And a lot of this stuff is just the NSA, and a lot of this stuff exists basically as informational collecting agencies to keep tabs on America's own citizens, you know, and so that's, you know, that's its own sort of its own ball of wax there, but you know, it's problematic that every single one of these agencies has its own set of laws, its own set of regulations that every American is expected to keep up with and know on a daily basis. I mean, it's absurd.
Well, and the crazy thing is too, you know, Matt, we're governed by those, and we should not be. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that we're governed by a bureaucracy, or that they can create these things and then have these rules that they say, well, you didn't follow this rule, therefore you're fined. No, no, you're not finding me.
Look what the CDC did during COVID.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about overstepping every piece of liberty that we have, you know, just coming out saying, oh, you got to do this, you have to do that, you know, this is our guidance. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And FEMA sometimes coming in and stepping in after disasters and telling people, you know, where they are allowed to go and not go. And, you know, it's all, you know, there was something I read recently that I really liked that said, you know, if you give your government the power to take away, if we give our government the power to take away our constitutional rights, under the guise of having emergencies, then we're encouraging our government to create emergencies so that they can justify taking away our rights. You know, and that's absolutely true, and we're seeing that more and more and more happen. Right?
Do you know, it's the dog chasing its tail syndrome, and nobody seems to get it, you know?
Yep, exactly. So in the interest of time, I'm going to jump through some of these here so that we can have a little more time to talk. Just real quickly, you know, this is just talking about, you know, what judges, the role judges and attorneys have in the system, and the ethical code of conducts that judges are expected to follow can be found here for Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Code of Judicial Conduct, and likewise, attorneys have to follow. Oops, I went too far. The standards of professionalism, which is codified into Oklahoma law and can be found here, and attorneys can you know, who do not follow the ethical code of the standards of professionalism can have different penalties and punishments depending on how egregious the violation is, but can include private reprimands, public reprimands, temporary suspensions, disbarments, and the like. Pretty much the whole gamut of, and can also be sanctioned, which is just a fine or a fee if money is involved, basically saying you have to pay certain things back, certain monies back that you may have taken or, you know, unethically. And so, you know, we have these ethical rules that exist for judges, for attorneys. We also have ethical rules that exist for teachers, which can be found here, the State Department of Education.
And we have those?
I know. It's surprising, right? Yeah, let's take a look at these. They're not nearly as exhaustive as the ones for judges and attorneys, but yeah. So teachers do have at least an ethical standard that they are supposed to be following.
Well, do they swear an oath to that? Do they sign some type of contract? I mean, how, like as a parent,
Sure.
for example, myself, how would I keep a teacher accountable or some administrator accountable ethically? Like, is there a legal recourse? Is there some way that I mean, or is there just, hey, you should know you're supposed to be ethical, and then that's the end of it?
Yeah, I mean, so you
Do they
can
swear an oath, or I mean, is there any type of like allegiance to that to hold them to that ethical system?
So that's a very good question, and so it depends on what they're actually violating, right? And so it's a little sneaky how this is done, because there are two principles that are codified in the Oklahoma Administrative Code that basically state a teacher must strive to help each student and must do these certain things, shall not unreasonably restrain students from independent action in the pursuit of learning. That's a big one that's not really being followed a lot lately. Shall not unreasonably deny student access to varying points of view. That's a biggie to me. Not unreasonably deny students access to varying points of view. Wow. In other words, be neutral and fair in what you're teaching. And some people now, interestingly, maybe a Democrat or a liberal would read that and say, well, that means that I get to teach, I get to use the schools to teach critical race theory, right, to students because it says, students can't be denied access to varying points of view. Well, but we also have a law now that says that teachers are not to teach CRT to students. So that law would supersede this administrative code provision. So the way that these laws interplay with each other is complex. It's not an easy answer. But to sort of answer your question of how do we enforce these principles? It's not like you can sue a teacher and say that and state that they're in violation of the Oklahoma Administrative Code. Technically you can, but under the doctrine of respondeat superior, that would go back to the schools not appropriately managing their own employees. And so what you'd have to do is sue independent school districts for not for failure to adequately hold teachers accountable to the principles, the ethical principles that are codified under the Oklahoma Administrative Code. Okay, so that's the long answer. The short answer is we probably need an ethics counselor commission. So like the attorneys, the Oklahoma Bar Association has basically a ethics council or ethics board and a complaint process. So if an attorney does something or the judge does something that is unethical, you can file a complaint against them and the board will review it. I'm not aware of any such process or through the Oklahoma State Department of Education. So what I would say is, hey, Ryan, maybe this is something we need to look into. Maybe the Oklahoma State Department of Education needs to implement a ethics board who can look at conduct of teachers, just like the Oklahoma Bar Association does. And parents, or citizens can file complaints against teachers. And the board can conduct, investigations into those complaints and determine whether or not any action is warranted, and whether any violation of these principles, these ethical codes and principles, has in fact happened. I think that's something that definitely should happen, and maybe librarians as well, right? Ethics in especially librarians in public schools, but librarians should be held to the same standards as teachers if they're in public schools, right? I would at least make that argument that they should be held to these standards. So some of
Well,
these
and this
books,
is why this is important, what you're saying, because
absolutely,
Michael and I both have been involved in lawsuits, he with Edmond Public Schools and us with Stillwater Public Schools. And basically what ends up happening is you either have to have an attorney who's willing to basically pro bono your case because, you know, even though you're great, Matt, you're going to charge me a chunk of money to do your job.
yeah, I mean, my
know.
bills don't stop just because I'm doing a free case to somebody, you know, so it's hard
Right?
to, yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then we have to go out and pay an attorney. In Michael's case, he had to raise the money. In our case, we have an attorney, Maria Seidler, who is just precious and has been doing so much of this, raising her own money to do it for us. But then the problem comes in here. The school system has their own attorneys paid for by all of us, by tax dollars,
right.
that then go and try to beat us for holding them to a standard. So
Yeah,
there aren't a lot of parents that can afford to do that or find attorney. There aren't 80 Maria Seidlers out there who are willing to give up their, you know, who are retired and willing to do this on their own dime.
Absolutely. And that's a big, you know, and that's a great argument for why we need a ethics commission over
definitely.
Over, you know, so like, you know, the Oklahoma Bar Association, let's look at that real quick.
Because Matt, if these schools could lose accreditation and effectively lose money because of an ethical violation, you know, handed down from a state board, the same way they would lose accreditation through academics or some other way, then that would give a somewhat of a check and balance to the people to, you know, go in and report these things. Say, hey, this is happening. They need to have some repercussion because there is no repercussion now. I mean, at all.
Not forget too, the legislators are in our election system is supposedly have the Oklahoma Ethics Commission to monitor it. And obviously, you know, I have massive disagreements with that commission on some things. But the point of the matter is there is one for that purpose.
There is, right? At least it exists.
About that is sound.
Yeah. Well, there's remedy in everything. You look at any kind of business, or, you know, if an electrician comes to my house and he does a bad job or does something unethical, I mean, I have recourse and remedy for that. When it comes to public education, there is nothing. There's no accountability there.
No.
Absolutely. I agree. And so, and that's why I say, you know, the Oklahoma Bar Association on the very front page, right here in the middle, the Ethics Council is right here, right? And you can click on that, and it talks about the Oklahoma Rules of Professional Conduct, standards of professionalism, and how to contact them, you know, and how to make complaints if you need to. You can, here's the lawyer complaint process right here, you know, there's a judicial complaint process, right? But you can download the complaint form right here. Now, what about over here at the state superintendent website? Do you see anything at all that says anything about ethics? I don't, you know. So does that mean that teachers are not held to ethical standards? Maybe it does. You know, they're supposed to be. I mean, there are ethical. There are, you know, we do have some ethical guidelines and standards, but they're very minimalistic. We have, you know, attorneys have an entire code of rules to follow. There's basically three principles here and that's it. That's all we have on the books for teachers. So that's probably that I would charge our legislators to take a look at this and say, maybe we need to expand the ethical expectations of teachers a bit. And then, you know, we also want to be careful to some extent of driving people away from, you know, driving good teachers away from the teaching profession by overburdening them with too many ethical things. However, again, it's a balancing. However, I think we definitely have room to raise the bar here a bit. with teachers, 100%.
Yeah. Well,
So
and I don't want to just pick on teachers either and just say, hey,
no,
this
no,
is
no.
only teachers. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know
nurses,
what the deal
doctors.
is for like administrators and the
Yeah,
higher,
administrators.
the real decision makers. Because a lot of teachers, Matt,
Mhm.
a lot of teachers are really good. I think a lot of teachers
Absolutely.
would actually appreciate an actual ethics type of enforcement in their school, because
Absolutely.
it would help bring back kind of the rule of law itself, because we know how bad behavior and discipline and all those things are in education. So if you have that kind of accountability, even at that teacher level, let alone go up the ladder to administration, but if you have that check and balance of accountability through an actual real ethics commission or board or something to investigate and do this kind of stuff, I mean, that itself could turn a lot of this stuff right around.
Well,
Absolutely.
and here's the interesting thing. So look at, hold on a second. I got to, don't know where that came from. So willful neglect of duty, repeated negligence in performance of duty, mental or physical abuse to a child. What I would argue that some of the counseling programs that we have and some of the SEL programs that we have are literally mental abuse of children.
Sure.
Incompetency. Well, tell me how many schools in Oklahoma have kids that are higher than 20% proficiency rating in English or math.
Right. Yeah. And
Instructional. So that goes to instructional ineffectiveness too. So commission of an act of moral turpitude. How many times do you see a teacher doing something sexual with a child?
right. And those are ground, if a teacher does these things, what's the punishment? Well, a teacher may, not shall, but may be dismissed or not reemployed. That's the big punishment for an act of moral turpitude with a student. You might lose your job. Okay, we probably need something a little more harsh on the books than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, we have this idea, I think, and a lot of this comes from the teachers' unions, I think, lobbying against maybe an effort to impose further ethical issues, but it's one of those things that I would definitely charge Ryan and our state legislatures to take a look at a little more seriously, for sure.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that could really make a big difference in education in the state immediately.
Amen.
Matt. Not over the course of, take 5 or 10 years. I mean,
no,
I think
right away.
You put in a board or commission that their sole job is education ethics across the board. I think that really starts the ball rolling in the right direction, especially for academics in this state.
I think we should all three write a formal letter to our superintendent and ask him to do so.
I agree.
I don't think that's a bad idea, and I think he'd probably be receptive to that idea.
Yep.
I think a lot of teachers would be receptive to that idea, and
I do too.
May even sign a petition to some extent asking him to do that. I don't know, but I think the interest is there to do something like this. But it's one of those things that there's going to be pushback. So you want to.
Well, Carl McGaw just said if you're going to write ethics, they have to be very specific and limited. These are way too subjective. And I do agree with that. You do have to be specific, because especially today.
Yeah.
What does moral turpitude mean?
Yes.
What does mental and physical abuse to a child mean? What is incompetency?
Yeah.
We need to define these terms, because these are way too subjective to be very useful to us in enforcing them, right?
Well, it sounds like before we even get an ethics commission, we need to make sure that we understand, what, be specific about these very things, because I definitely agree with Carl. I mean, because what ends up happening is, and I know this as a former classroom teacher, it depends on who's in power in the building at the time as to what's allowed. And then it's the same way at the superintendent's office. I mean, under Joy, there was a whole lot of stuff that was unethical that, you know, I certainly heard of, if didn't see, right? And beginning with her campaign, frankly, her first campaign, that was just allowed to go on. So I mean, I definitely agree. There's got to be some specificity there, such as, you know, moral turpitude, such as, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings us kind of to this next topic, away from teachers and to legislators, you know, the ethics of our leaders.